Hi, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Today, we're going to cover the QQQ for December 7th, 2020. We're just going to call them the Qs for brevity's sakes. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. For background, Prep to Grow is an AI and big data company that provides stock and option related services for investors and institutional companies. So let's just jump into this. So what's the net? So last week, or this week since it's Friday, October 4th, we predicted it was going to be volatile with a bull and bear, where it's certainly gone up and broke through an all-week 52-week high. It was a volatile ride up. Dropped down at the beginning of the week, kind of went up, dropped down midweek, went up, and is broken through a new 52-week high. It was 1.4% near the all-time high at the beginning of the week, but it just kind of broke through it. So does that mean there's going to be a breakout? We don't think so, especially not in December. We feel that there's a bear. There's some real good signs that there's a small pullback about to occur in the data that we're seeing. And we'll kind of go through that and discuss it. So the reasoning is, first, positive reasons. There's just less volatility. There seems to be more stability within the markets. A lot less volume than usual, but it's December and that's pretty normal. 52-week high, they broke through it. The Qs broke through it, so we'll see where that actually goes. Again, we feel it's going to be a pullback. Macro conditions, as always, have gotten more severe in last week. We can't really talk about the specifics because our videos get banned every time we do, so everybody knows what's going on with the lockdowns and whatnot, changes in California. So those conditions are not ripe, especially with the unemployment conditions being half of expectations this week. So that's not a good sign either. December slowdown. So we've been predicting this for a while. Those things really feed into it. Slower unemployment growth, the macro conditions, traditional December slowdown. I think all in all, December's going to be a small pullback this month. Again, I think for next week specifically, the data that we're seeing, it looks like it's a bear. So before we jump into those details, let's talk about the companies that are announcing this week. First one's Adobe. They're closing out their Q4 and fiscal year. They look good. We have a 91% accuracy in predicting on them. If you don't know who Adobe is, Adobe does primarily marketing-oriented offerings and design tools, Photoshop, Adobe Premiere. I've been using them since the very beginning days of my career, and they're from my hometown of San Jose, California. So always a big fan of Adobe and the great work that they do. All external expectations are going to be positive. Expecting 3.36 billion revenue this quarter with 2.66 EPS. The big concern is, if you see this graph right in the middle, between June and August or so, dramatic pullback by Adobe in growth. Now, it didn't impact their Q3, so it could have been that they were setting up for an acquisition or just saw some anomalies in their revenue data and pulled back heavily. But it didn't impact their Q3 at all. They had a great Q3. Heading into Q4, they've continued to ramp up to what they were before that pullback. So no real insight into why that pullback occurred. Don't believe it'll impact their Q4 fiscal year, but that should give everybody a dramatic pause about that group. Unusual option activity. There were some for calls right before Thanksgiving, the week before Thanksgiving, for December 18, 2020 and February 19, 2020. 8.4 million in calls bought on that day. I believe it was November 17th or 18th. But I think we had that in a previous video. So big call, big bet on their fiscal year end by somebody or a couple of people. So that's Adobe. Again, all expectations is that they'll have a good fiscal year in Q4. But again, the pause is that super dramatic pullback and no real reasoning as to why. Let's get into Broadcom. For those that know, AVGO is actually their stock symbol. Broadcom acquired AVGO a few years ago, and the CEO AVGO wanted to keep the stock symbol. And so they worked out a deal. Well, AVGO became Broadcom's stock symbol. Pretty crazy story from my understanding. Broadcom looks good, growing, high growth. We're expecting they're going to grow. Analysts expecting they're going to grow. Volume is way down on these for throughout the year, from the beginning of the year to now. Our accuracy on AVGO is not very good. It's 65%, so it's better than flipping a coin. So take this with a grain of salt. And their stock increase has been 28% for year to date, I believe. So all expectations that they're going to have a good quarter. Broadcom does chips for networking, Bluetooth, etc. So you probably have some device that has Broadcom within it. For my time at Cisco, certainly know who they were. Good company, good solid company. For this quarter, 6.2 billion in revenue with 5.14 earnings per share. Again, all signs support to a good quarter, but again, our accuracy is 65% on picking the right direction on where their options are and stocks are going to go. So take it with a grain of salt, but they seem to have a good quarter. So let's jump into unusual option, let's jump into who's announcing next week. Going to be a light week, especially heading into the holiday seasons. Paycheck is the only one announcing next week. And they look pretty decent from what the data we've seen thus far on them. Let's jump into unusual volume activity. So we're going to do something a little bit different today. So Prep2Go just released their application for beta, so folks can go in and look at stock recommendations, scan the market, and look at options and companies with unusual option activity. So let's just jump into what that is. So this is the new beta application. So I'm just going to jump in the filter and pull up the ones I want to. Obviously, there's a lot of filters we have. Success rate, volume to open interest is really the thing that we would look at. Market cap, forecasted, EPS, so on and so forth. So this scans thousands of option chain stocks and companies a day. So I'm going to pick on the ones that I've already flagged. And the first one is Qualcomm. Qualcomm, their volume and open interest is 11 times. This was from December 2nd. So 1,052 volume. So a lot of transactions that day. We concur with this movement, although we think it's about a 67% chance of success within 13 days. Again, the expiration date is December 31st at the strike price of $135. So a lot of activity for Qualcomm for that date. The next one is Micron. This is for June 18th at the 65 strike price. Last price was $745. It was a volume and open interest rate of 2.9. This was from December 2nd as well. Not too much volume, but certainly with their ramp up, someone's betting against them. We agree with this. We think the stock is going to go down quite a bit, and this has an 83% chance of success. So those are the unusual option activities that we see from the Qs this week. Jumping back into the rest of the details. So let's jump into the meat of why we think there's going to be a bear this week. 30-day growth. This is the prediction, 30-day growth predictions. If we look at that red box right there in the upper right, it looks like it's a pullback. We monitor millions of data points every single day on these companies. Since 2010, some of them that have come out, obviously we added in more recently, but historically, when you see this kind of blip on multi-days, it's maybe a start of a small pullback, and that's why we're projecting a bear. If we look at what the analysts are saying generally, they seem to concur. They actually pulled back a little bit on their estimates for the FAANGs specifically. We really separate FAANGs from others because 65% of the total Qs are made up of FAANG companies. And so if they have a little bit of an estimate like this, there could be a bit of a pullback. And if you look at it, it's about a 5% that they've kind of readjusted on the earnings per share. Now on the non-FAANGs, they look fine. They're still growing. But again, they're the remainder 35% of the Qs. So the 65% will undoubtedly move the 35%. So this is why we're projecting a pullback or a bear either next week or the week after that. Our long option volume also kind of indicates that. Usually long option volume just means that you've bought an option for security, but really maybe making a shorter term play. And that's at least what we see in the data. So they're pulling back as well. Less calls, way more options in the less calls, more puts in the volume. So that's another reason why we're expecting a pullback. This is our own predictions, bulls versus bears, pullback on calls and stocks as well. Again, we separate FAANGs from other, not as dramatic as a pullback or kind of reversal of a pullback between others and FAANGs. So that's why we don't think it's going to be too much of a major pullback. But others, we're expecting way more puts to occur. But on the FAANGs, it's kind of followed that cyclical trend up and down week over week. So that's why we're predicting a small bear. Our predicted stock price, same thing, small pullback from the FAANGs, not really anything occurring with the non-FAANGs, really kind of steady state, some uptick. But again, pullback on the FAANGs is a small pullback on the FAANGs is what we're predicting around the stock price. So again, for the week of December 7th, 2020, our expectations there'd be a small bear, pullback, and we talked about this last week as well. Some volatility this week kind of going into the next week. 52-week high, which is great for the Qs, but is it sustainable and continue to growth? Ultimately, we think there's going to be a pullback before hopefully continued acceleration through December and growth in Q1. We appreciate your time. I hope you have a great week of trading, and thanks again. If you like the content, like and subscribe.